a lot of things that are definitely genuine experiences that an individual can have in this world is being shoved under the carpet because science can't deal with them.
Inspired by Buddhism, but you're not a Buddhist.
Yes.
How inspired by Buddhism would you have to be in order for you to be a Buddhist? I mean, at what point does one describe themselves as a Buddhist? Why are you reluctant to have that label?
Because I'm specifically inspired a lot by Zen Buddhism.
Zen Buddhism?
Yes, and so Zen Buddhism deals a lot with the nature of categorization. And so they basically, very roughly, and I'm very generalizing right now, is they don't think much of labels.
Okay.
And so, so first of all, I wouldn't limit myself by calling myself a Zen Buddhist. And secondly, what Zen Buddhism means in Japan, where it culturally flourished and became the most popular. It's originally it came from China. It was it origined in China, but it came.
There are many branches of Buddhism, right?
Exactly.
Which one's the Dalai Lama?
Tibetan.
Tibetan, but that's distinct in and of itself, different from the Buddhism in China.
And different from the Buddhism in Japan.
And you've got Theravada and
Mahayana. Yep.
One spread to the north, one spread to the south.
Yep.
I think Theravada in the south, in Sri Lanka, and places like that. And you...
Aren't you hot wearing this?
I am hot, yeah.
Well, at least it's white. At least it's not black, it'll be even hotter. Yeah, so the Zen Buddhism is the one that you identify with the most. How is it different to the other strains of Buddhism that we mentioned?
Right, so it has very different views on spirituality.
Okay.
And so and also the way of how you come to enlightenment. Okay. So within Abrahamic religions, as well as some branches of Buddhism, there's this divide between the spiritual world, say, and this ordinary world.
Yeah.
And as much as in Abrahamic religion you have all these things that you can do supposedly to become a divine and enlightened human being, in Mahayana Buddhism or in the Tibetan Buddhism or whatever, you have all these steps and all these things.
Okay.
Zen Buddhism sort of gets rid of all that
to reach nirvana, right?
Yes.
Okay.
And what Zen Buddhism does is what a specific characteristic thing of Zen Buddhism is that they speak of satori, which is which may be translated in English to instantaneous, sudden realization and enlightenment.
Okay.
And so,
like an epiphany.
Yes, and basically. And you're actually not supposed to put it into words. You actually dumb down as soon as you put it into words. But the Zen Buddhist is enlightened. The Zen Buddhist that's enlightened doesn't necessarily regard himself a spiritual human being. He regards himself just as a human being. And so Zen Buddhism sort of takes a stance where most of the strife of individuals in their lives comes from the fact that they either, whether consciously or unconsciously, try to either be angels or demons.
Okay. Well, it sounds like you are a Buddhist, but a real Buddhist wouldn't say that.
No.
Is it a kind of a humility or a humbleness?
No.
To not say,
and I think if you'd study a bit of Zen Buddhism, so you mentioned Alan Watts earlier when I shook your hand.
Yeah, Alan Watts. Yeah,
he has a great book called The Way of Zen.
Okay. Alan Watts was a Christian who then leaned towards Buddhism.
Yes.
Right? Okay. And I think for him the two labels didn't negate each other, right? He could still be a Christian and a Buddha, or be a Christian inspired by Buddhism.
I think that by the end of his life, he stopped calling himself anything.
Okay. Well, there you go. Well, I think what you mentioned about the Abrahamic faiths and the Western religions, they're very into labels. They say this is our Bible, or this is the Quran, and this is our prophet. Who's your prophet? What's your Bible? What's your Quran? And in the Eastern traditions, maybe it's not as simple as that.
All right. So I try to look at things very pragmatically.
Yeah.
Like, so I don't like labels, but if I'd have to put a label on myself, I basically have three: artist, philosopher. Arguably my most favorite one, although I still don't like limiting myself or labeling myself, would be a pragmatic mystic. And so it's not so much that I draw up on a specific document or a specific thing, or that I adhere to specific rules. I'm starting from within. I'm starting from myself. I've read a lot of books that I find very interesting, and I'm just trying to get forward.
Very interesting.
And so. What I'm very interested in specifically, and which I try to tackle in my art, is this clash between science and religion.
Okay.
And so I've had plenty of conversations over here on the nature of reality and all that stuff, and is there a creator, and all these eternal questions which I feel you can debate for forever. I don't think we're going to go anywhere.
We never win. The Christians and Muslims go at it every week here and ridicule each other's beliefs.
I know.
They should just put it to one side and say, you think this, I think that, let's move on.
Probably.
That's what I think anyway.
And so I think that what's really going to drive a lot of the changes that are to come in our world is going to be, which was spearheaded by the technological revolution, the scientific and technological revolution, and that machine is still churning on. And so what I'm very interested in is that, you have all these Islamic and Christian preachers or speakers, I should say, and I don't think they are very effective in really making a change, although I don't want to insult them by saying so. By converting these supposedly atheistic folk that are around here right now, And so I'm really trying to get into the vanguard of culture and where we stand. And so I can share with you a development that I find very interesting. Is what I see that is a problematic thing in science is that a lot of things that are definitely genuine experiences that an individual can have in this world is being shoved under the carpet because science can't deal with them. And so dreams would be a thing, for example, where we say that's irrational and rubbish, it's nothing. Another thing that the scientific community is absolutely baffled about, and that we do not have an objective or scientific grasp on whatsoever, is the experience of what happens when people take psychedelics, which is the very reason why in the 1960s, as soon as it became very popular, and with all the problems that came with it, we just banned them all. And so we are in a state right now where depression is skyrocketing, suicide is skyrocketing, you have self-harm, especially among young girls, and there's these troubling things that are basically attacks on our collective psyche by the popularity and rising of social media. It appears to be a very bad thing. And mental health care hasn't really developed all that much to deal with all of the new problems and all of the skyrocketing, worrying statistics of people becoming depressed or stressed or burnouts or whatever. And so what's funny right now is that, and this is what I find very interesting, is you have a lot of institutes and universities and all these research laboratoria that are now clinically testing with MDMA for people who suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder, which is a condition that we haven't really been able to completely get our heads around and really cure people fully and 100%, but they're making big steps with these MDMA therapies that they're now clinically testing.
Which is ecstasy, right?
Which is ecstasy, yes. And perhaps even a more interesting one is that they have done clinical trials. Right now they are doing clinical trials with psilocybin, so magic mushrooms, with people who are terminally ill with cancer. And about 75 or 80% coming from such a psilocybin trip, which is often also quite a high dose. And then it's an assistant trip, like there's all these people around to make sure the individual is fine and gets the proper guidance. So it's it's relatively safe. About 80% comes out of that trip saying that about 80% of their depression is lifted, and about 80% of, if you could put that in percentages, they are a whole lot less afraid of death, even 6 months after having taken that single dose. And then so the scientific question here, or what a lot of people seem to be very worried about, or scientists seem to be very scared about, is how we are going to interpret the experiences these subjects have when they are on this drug. Because people speak of divine encounters and all these things that are happening to them, and I'm like, all right, so we don't know how to interpret them. We don't know how to approach these experiences that they have, whether we have to call them divine or all that stuff. But all things considered, at the end of the day, let's be scientific about it. Let's be empirical about it. We are seeing the results. We are seeing that people are coming out of these trips and it's benefiting them a lot. Let's take the next step and investigate what these weird psychic worlds are that we enter as soon as we say take LSD or magic mushrooms or whatever. So yeah.
Very interesting stuff. I hope we'll chat again.
Right.
Thank you very much.
Cheers.